Sam's heart nearly stopped when he saw the dog. It was standing on a floating ice sheet, drifting farther from shore with every passing second. The dog, a medium-sized mix with matted fur, was struggling to keep its balance on the ice, its paws slipping with each move. Sam's breath caught in his throat. The ice beneath the dog was cracking, and Sam could see the water below, dark and deadly, threatening to swallow the helpless animal whole. Without thinking, he took off running, his feet slipping on the slick surface as he headed toward the edge of the river. The sound of cracking ice filled his ears, making his stomach tighten. Every second counted, and he knew he had to act. The dog looked terrified, its eyes wide with panic as the ice sheet creaked and groaned beneath its weight. Sam pushed himself harder, the cold wind stinging his face, but all he could focus on was that dog, stranded and alone. "Come on, come on," Sam whispered to himself, the words barely audible against the howling wind. He tried to push away the fear clawing at his chest, the thought that the ice might break, that he might not get there in time. But he couldn't stop now. He had to reach the dog, had to save it. As he ran, he saw the ice shift once more, and the dog yelped, slipping on its feet before catching itself at the last second. Sam's legs burned with the effort, but his mind stayed locked on the animal. The riverbank seemed so far now, the gap between them widening as the ice sheet drifted further into the open water. Sam felt the first real pang of panic. He couldn't let it happen. He couldn't let this dog fall. The cold seeped into his bones as he approached the edge of the ice. He had no idea how he was going to reach the dog. There was no way to safely cross the ice without risking his own life, but Sam didn't care. His eyes never left the dog, whose trembling body was still trying to stand firm against the current of the drifting ice. It was a fight against nature, one that the dog couldn't win on its own. Sam took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He was close enough now to hear the dog's soft whines, the desperate sounds of an animal trapped in a nightmare. The fear in the dog's eyes mirrored the fear inside him. Sam's mind raced, but he kept pushing forward, knowing that time was slipping away, and the cold, dark water below was the only certainty in a world that seemed to be slipping through his fingers. He glanced around, hoping for some way to get the dog back to safety, but the world around him was still. The cold stretched out in all directions. There was no one. There was just him and the dog. Sam reached the edge of the ice, his breath coming in shallow gasps, his heart pounding against his ribs. He could see the dog more clearly now, its body trembling from the cold, its legs stiff with fear. The ice beneath them cracked again, sending a chill of terror through Sam's spine. The dog looked back at him, its eyes wide with panic, but it couldn't move any closer. It was trapped. Sam's legs ached, but he pushed through the pain, his hands reaching out, his voice shaking. "Come here, boy," Sam whispered, his voice barely a sound against the wind. "I'm not gonna let you fall." The dog whimpered, taking a cautious step forward, then another, its movements hesitant, unsure. Sam's heart clenched. It was scared, just like him. But the dog wasn't going to make it on its own. Sam knew it. He couldn't wait any longer. He took a deep breath, crouching low to the ice and holding out his hand. The dog hesitated, but Sam could see the trust beginning to flicker in its eyes. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Slowly, it moved closer, inching forward, its body still shaking. Sam's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. The dog was so close, but every crack of ice beneath them made Sam's blood run cold. He couldn't lose this dog. Not after everything he'd already seen. The helplessness in its eyes, the fight it was putting up against the forces of nature. With one final, desperate push, the dog closed the gap, its trembling body brushing against Sam's hand. He grabbed hold of its collar, pulling it toward him as the ice groaned beneath them. The fear coursing through his veins was overwhelming, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. The dog was counting on him. For a moment, Sam thought the ice would break beneath them both, that they would both be swallowed by the freezing water. His hand tightened around the dog's collar, his pulse racing as he pulled it closer. The dog, too, seemed to sense the danger, its body instinctively moving toward Sam's warmth, its paws slipping but still trying to move. Sam gritted his teeth, summoning every ounce of strength left in him. He felt the ice beneath him shift, but he couldn't stop. With one final pull, he managed to get the dog close enough that he could wrap his arms around it, holding on with everything he had. The dog whined softly, its body still trembling. But now, it wasn't just fear, it was relief, too. Sam's muscles screamed in protest as he stood, supporting the dog's weight with every step. The ice sheet was still cracking, and every movement sent a wave of dread through him. But he kept going, inch by inch. He couldn't let go now. The dog had placed its trust in him, and he wasn't about to fail it. Finally, with one last strained effort, Sam and the dog reached solid ground. The ice creaked one final time as the weight of their steps left it behind. Sam collapsed, his breath ragged, as the dog sat beside him, still trembling but now safe. He felt the weight of the moment settle on him. He had done it. He had saved the dog. Sam sat on the cold ground, his hands still trembling from the effort. The dog was beside him now, its body still shaking, but its eyes were no longer filled with panic. Instead, it looked at Sam with a quiet kind of trust, as if it knew, in that moment, that it was safe. The adrenaline that had been coursing through Sam's veins slowly began to ebb away, leaving exhaustion in its wake. His body ached, his muscles burning from the strain, but there was something else there, something deeper. A sense of relief. The kind of relief that only comes after you've done something you never thought you could. The dog lay down beside him, its breath coming in short bursts as it tried to calm itself. Sam gently reached over, his fingers brushing through the dog's matted fur. It felt fragile under his touch, like it hadn't known comfort in a long time. He could feel its body still shivering, and without thinking he scooted closer, wrapping his jacket around the dog. The warmth from his body seemed to ease the dog's trembling just a little, and Sam felt a knot loosen in his chest. He sat there in silence, the weight of what he had just done sinking in. He had risked his life to save a dog he didn't know, with no guarantee of success, no promise that it would even survive the ordeal. But he had done it anyway. His mind replayed the moments on the ice, the sound of it cracking, the fear that had surged through him when he thought they wouldn't make it. But somehow they had. He had saved it. The dog nudged him with its nose, a soft, hesitant touch. Sam looked down at it, his heart swelling with something he couldn't quite put into words. There was no way to explain why he had done it, no way to justify the risk. But there didn't need to be. The dog, with its quiet gratitude and trust, said everything Sam needed to hear. He stood up slowly, his legs unsteady from the cold and the exhaustion. But the dog followed him, its steps unsure, but determined. It didn't leave him. Even after everything that had happened, after the fear and the chaos, it stayed by his side. Sam looked down at it, the weight of its dependence on him suddenly pressing on his chest. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to do now. Was he supposed to take it home? Was he supposed to leave it behind to find its way back to wherever it came from? He didn't know the answers, but what he did know was that he wasn't going to leave it. Not now. The dog looked up at him again, and Sam could feel its silent gratitude, its quiet acknowledgement of what he had done for it. And in that moment he realized that this wasn't just about saving a dog from an ice sheet. It was about something bigger. It was about a bond, a connection between two creatures who had come together in the most unlikely of circumstances. And somehow, in that moment, it felt like that was enough. Sam and the dog stayed there for a while, the silence between them comforting, as if both of them needed a moment to process what had just happened. Sam's heart was still racing, his body sore from the cold and the fear. The dog, though quiet, seemed to be regaining its strength, its breathing evening out. Sam looked down at it, wondering where it had come from, who it belonged to, but the question seemed unimportant now. All that mattered was that they were both alive. The dog stood up slowly, testing its legs, its body still weak but moving with more confidence than before. Sam took a deep breath and stood as well, his legs shaky. He had to move. He couldn't just sit there. The dog needed help, and Sam knew he couldn't just leave it on the edge of the ice, no matter how much his own body begged for rest. "Come on," Sam muttered, taking a cautious step forward. The dog followed him, its steps still unsure but determined. Sam had no plan, no clear idea of what he was supposed to do next, but the thought of leaving the dog alone, stranded again, was unbearable. His mind raced, trying to think of where they could go. The ice sheet was too dangerous. He needed to get the dog somewhere safe, somewhere warm. His eyes scanned the area, and that's when he remembered the small cabin near the river, a place where he and his dad would sometimes go to fish. It was isolated, but it was warm and dry, and it had everything they would need to wait for help. Sam had no idea how he would get the dog there, but he had to try. It was the only place that made sense. "Let's go," he said to the dog, who seemed to understand, its tail wagging ever so slightly as it moved closer to him. Sam kept a hand on the dog's back as they made their way across the uneven terrain, moving slowly but steadily. The cold bit at his skin, but he barely noticed it now. The dog was still with him. It was the one thing that kept him going, the one thing that made all of this worth it. The dog began to pick up its pace, as if it understood the urgency, and Sam felt a small spark of hope. Maybe they could make it. Maybe they could both survive this. The walk was long, and every step felt like a struggle, but Sam never stopped. The dog stayed right beside him, a constant companion in the storm of his thoughts and fears. As they neared the cabin, Sam's legs grew heavier, the exhaustion creeping in. But the thought of the dog, now so much more than just an animal he had saved, kept him moving. The bond between them, forged in fear and survival, felt as real as anything he had ever known. When they reached the cabin, Sam's breath came out in ragged bursts. He opened the door and led the dog inside, feeling a rush of relief wash over him. The dog collapsed onto the floor, curling up in the corner, exhausted but safe. Sam sank to the ground beside it, his hands shaking, his heart still thumping in his chest. The cold outside had nothing on the warmth he felt in this moment. The dog was safe, and somehow, so was he. Sam sat on the floor beside the dog, his body aching from the cold and the weight of what he had just done. The dog lay quietly on the floor, its body still shivering, but its breathing deepening as the warmth of the cabin slowly seeped into its bones. Sam reached over, placing a hand on the dog's fur, feeling its softness. And for the first time in what felt like hours, he allowed himself to exhale. He had done it. He had gotten the dog to safety. But as Sam sat there, exhaustion pulling at him, he couldn't shake the fear that had gripped him on the ice. He kept replaying the moment in his head, the cracks of the ice, the desperate tug of the rope, the way the water had seemed so close to swallowing them both. He didn't know what he would have done if he hadn't been able to reach the dog in time. That thought lingered in the back of his mind, threatening to overwhelm him. But he pushed it away. The dog was safe. They were safe. The dog stirred, lifting its head slightly as if sensing Sam's unease. It looked up at him, its eyes still filled with gratitude, but there was something else there too, a quiet understanding. The dog knew it had been saved, and Sam knew in that moment that they shared something deep. A bond had been formed between them in those few minutes on the ice, something more than just an act of rescue. It was the kind of connection that didn't need words, only the simple presence of one soul helping another. Sam reached for the blanket at the foot of the bed and draped it over the dog, watching as it curled up, its body still trembling slightly but now more relaxed. Sam wasn't sure how long they would stay in the cabin or how long it would take for the dog to recover, but he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't leave it. Not after what he had just done. He couldn't walk away from the bond they had forged, even if it was just in the most unlikely of circumstances. The dog closed its eyes, settling into the warmth of the blanket, its body slowly relaxing. Sam ran a hand through his own hair, his mind still racing, but for the first time in hours, a sense of calm began to wash over him. He had saved a life today. Not just any life, but a life that had been in danger, helpless in a situation beyond its control. And though it had been terrifying, Sam felt something else deep in his chest. He felt proud. Proud of what he had done, proud of the courage he had found in the face of fear. As the dog drifted off to sleep, Sam sat beside it for a while longer, the silence of the cabin wrapping around them like a protective blanket. The storm outside had stopped, but Sam knew that the real storm had passed. In that moment, everything felt right. The dog was safe. He was safe. And together they had faced something that had changed them both in ways Sam didn't fully understand yet. But somehow, he knew he would never forget. The next morning, Sam woke to the soft sound of the dog's quiet breathing. He hadn't realized how deeply he'd fallen asleep, the exhaustion from the rescue taking over his body. The dog was still curled up on the blanket, its body no longer trembling, but its eyes still a little wide, as if unsure of what came next. Sam stretched, feeling the stiffness in his limbs, but there was a lightness in his chest he hadn't expected. The dog was safe. He had saved it. But more than that, it felt like the start of something bigger than either of them. He stood slowly, the aches in his body reminding him of the struggle on the ice, but the thought of the dog looking at him with that silent gratitude pushed him forward. He moved to the small stove in the corner of the cabin and stoked the fire, the warmth slowly filling the room. The dog lifted its head, watching him cautiously but didn't move. Sam smiled, offering a soft, "It's okay, I'm not going anywhere." The dog stayed where it was, the quiet tension still in the air. Sam made a decision in that moment. He wasn't going to leave it. He had no idea where it had come from, or how it had ended up in the middle of that river, but that didn't matter anymore. He had rescued it, and in doing so he'd unknowingly made a promise to protect it. His chest tightened at the thought. It wasn't just about saving the dog physically, it was about a responsibility now. A bond that had formed in the heat of fear and urgency. Sam finished tending to the fire, then sat back down beside the dog, his hand resting gently on its back. The warmth of the cabin filled him with a sense of calm he hadn't expected. The fear and the adrenaline from the previous day still lingered, but it was being replaced by something softer, a connection that felt real, even though they hadn't spoken a word. The dog shifted slightly, leaning into his touch, and Sam's heart swelled with emotion. It was small, this act of comfort, but it meant everything. He could feel the dog's trust growing, its body relaxing as the warmth wrapped around them both. Hours passed in quiet companionship, and as Sam looked down at the dog, he realized that this wasn't just a simple rescue. It was more than that. He had faced the unknown, had acted out of instinct and kindness, and now the dog had become a part of his life in a way he hadn't expected. It had been an act of courage, yes, but also of compassion. The kind of compassion that doesn't ask for anything in return, the kind that sees another being in need and just acts. When he finally stood up to gather his things, the dog followed him, its steps still hesitant but steady. Sam paused, looking down at it, and in that moment, he knew he wasn't just walking out of the cabin to return to normal life. He was walking with the dog by his side, and somehow that felt like the right thing to do. A promise made, a bond formed. Sam didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't walking away from this. Not now. Not ever. Sam walked out of the cabin, the dog by his side, its steps now confident and steady. The warmth of the fire still lingered in his skin, but there was a different kind of warmth in his heart now, one that came from something deeper. He hadn't expected any of this. He hadn't expected to bond with the dog, to feel the weight of the responsibility he had taken on so suddenly. But there it was, undeniable and real, and Sam knew he couldn't turn back now. As they made their way down the path, the dog trotting beside him, Sam realized something important. The world had seemed so overwhelming in that moment on the ice, so full of danger and uncertainty. But in that moment of fear, in the face of something bigger than him, he had made a choice. He had chosen to act not out of obligation, but because something inside of him had told him it was the right thing to do. And now he was standing with the dog, alive, safe, and together. It wasn't just the dog that had been saved. It was something in Sam himself, too. He had learned something important in that struggle. That kindness, real kindness, was about showing up when it mattered most. It was about acting even when you weren't sure of the outcome, even when it felt like the odds were stacked against you. It was about seeing the need and answering it, without hesitation, without question. Sam stopped for a moment, watching the dog's eyes as it looked up at him. He could see the trust in those eyes, the same trust that had pushed him to keep going when everything inside him told him to stop. That bond, that quiet understanding between them, was more powerful than any fear, any uncertainty. It was the simple truth that kindness was what connected them. As they walked, Sam's mind kept returning to the moment on the ice, the way the dog had clung to him, the way it had relied on him in its moment of need. It was an act of pure trust, and Sam realized that trust wasn't something you earned by doing big, grand things. It was something you built slowly, piece by piece, in every small, quiet moment. The dog had trusted him without question, and in return Sam had given everything he had, because in that moment that was all he could do. When they finally reached the end of the path, Sam paused, turning to look at the dog. It had come to mean something more to him than he had ever expected. It wasn't just about a rescue anymore. It was about a promise to stand by it no matter what, and to never back away when the world asked for something bigger than himself. As Sam looked at the dog, he knew that this wasn't just about saving a life. It was about the power of choosing kindness, about how one small act could ripple out and change everything. He smiled, his heart full. What act of kindness can you give today? Because even the smallest gesture can make a world of difference.